Have you been dreaming about that Mediterranean cruise you've always wanted to take? Or perhaps you're planning to visit your grandchildren across the country. Travel after retirement is one of life's greatest joys, a well-deserved reward after decades of hard work. But what if I told you there are hidden dangers that most travel guides never mention, especially for those of us over 70? I'm passionate about helping fellow seniors live their best lives. Today, we're talking about something incredibly important that could potentially save your next vacation, or even your life. Before we dive in, I want to make something crystal clear. This isn't about fear-mongering or discouraging you from traveling. Quite the opposite. I've been traveling more in my 70s than I ever did in my 40s, and I want the same for you. This is about arming you with knowledge so you can travel confidently and safely, no matter your age. In this video, we'll explore 5 shocking travel risks that specifically affect seniors over 70. Risks that most travel agents won't tell you about, but that could make all the difference between a dream vacation and a nightmare experience. And don't worry, for each risk, I'll share practical solutions so you can still enjoy your adventures without unnecessary worry. Let's start with the first risk, one that caught me completely off guard during my trip to Europe last year. Medication complications and accessibility issues abroad. Did you know that many common medications in your home country go by completely different names in other countries? Or that some medications we take for granted here might be strictly controlled or even illegal in certain destinations? I learned this lesson the hard way when I ran out of my blood pressure medication while visiting Italy. I thought, no problem, I'll just visit a local pharmacy. Well, friends, I spent nearly an entire day of my vacation going from pharmacy to doctor's office, trying to explain my medication needs with a language barrier and without my medical records. The Italian doctor couldn't prescribe the exact same medication I was taking because it wasn't available under that name. And the substitute caused some unpleasant side effects that affected the rest of my trip. Here's what I wish I had known. Before traveling internationally, schedule an appointment with your doctor at least a month before departure. Discuss all your medications and get written prescriptions using the generic names, as these are more universally recognized. Ask for a letter explaining your medical conditions and necessary medications, preferably translated into the language of your destination country. And most importantly, pack enough medication for your entire trip, plus at least an extra week's worth in case of unexpected delays. Another tip is to research the legal status of your medications in your destination country. Surprisingly, common medications like codeine-based painkillers, certain sleep aids, and even some allergy medications are heavily restricted or banned in countries like Japan, United Arab Emirates, and Singapore. A quick online search or a call to the embassy can save you from a very uncomfortable situation at customs. The second risk that most seniors don't anticipate is the hidden dangers of travel insurance fine print, something that could leave you with catastrophic medical bills. Many of us dutifully purchase travel insurance before a trip, feeling protected and responsible. But did you know that standard travel insurance policies often contain age-related restrictions that kick in after 70? Some policies quietly reduce coverage, increase deductibles, or exclude pre-existing conditions for older travelers. My dear friend Eleanor discovered this during her dream trip to Australia. At 76, she suffered a fall that resulted in a hip fracture. Despite having purchased what she thought was comprehensive travel insurance, she was shocked to learn that her policy had a special clause limiting emergency medical coverage for travelers over 75 to just $10,000. Barely enough to cover her initial hospital admission, let alone surgery and medical evacuation back home. Eleanor and her family ended up paying over $50,000 out of pocket for expenses her insurance wouldn't cover. To avoid this scenario, you need to carefully examine any travel insurance policy before purchasing. Look specifically for age restrictions or limitations in the fine print. Consider specialized senior travel insurance policies, which may cost more but provide appropriate coverage for our age group. Some companies actually specialize in covering older travelers with pre-existing conditions. I personally use a travel insurance broker who can compare multiple policies side by side and explain the fine print in plain English. For those longer international trips, consider supplemental medical evacuation insurance. It might seem expensive at first, but compared to the potential cost of medical evacuation, it's actually quite reasonable. Now, let's talk about the third major risk, the silent threat of deep vein thrombosis, or DVT. Something that becomes significantly more dangerous after 70. DVT occurs when blood clots form in the deep veins, usually in the legs, due to prolonged sitting during long flights or car journeys. These clots can break free and travel to the lungs, causing a potentially fatal pulmonary embolism. What many seniors don't realize is that our risk of DVT increases dramatically with age, especially after 70. This is due to naturally slower circulation, thicker blood, and the likelihood of taking medications that might further increase clotting risk. Yet remarkably few seniors take specific precautions against DVT when traveling. My neighbor Carl, a healthy and active 78-year-old, developed DVT after a 14-hour flight to visit his son in Japan. He had no idea he was at risk, he walked regularly and had no history of heart problems. But 2 days after arriving, his calf became swollen and painful. Fortunately, his son recognized the symptoms and rushed him to the hospital, where doctors found a substantial blood clot. Carl spent a week in a Japanese hospital and had to delay his return flight by nearly a month while on blood thinners. So how can you protect yourself? First, talk to your doctor about your personal DVT risk before long journeys. For flights or train rides longer than 4 hours, wear compression stockings, and not just the knee-high variety you find at the drugstore. Properly fitted, medical-grade compression stockings make a significant difference for seniors. During long journeys, make a point of getting up and walking the aisle at least once every hour when it's safe to do so. When seated, regularly flex and point your feet, and rotate your ankles in circles. Stay well hydrated, but limit alcohol and caffeine, which can contribute to dehydration. Some doctors may even recommend a preventative dose of aspirin before long flights for certain patients, though you should never start this without medical advice. The fourth risk might surprise you. It's one I never considered until it happened to a close friend. Cognitive overload and disorientation in unfamiliar environments. As we age, our brains process new information differently. What younger travelers take in stride, navigating unfamiliar airports, deciphering foreign transit systems, adjusting to new time zones can overwhelm the senior brain, leading to confusion, anxiety, and even temporary cognitive impairment that resembles dementia. My friend Barbara, who has always been sharp as a tack and travels regularly, experienced this frightening phenomenon during a trip to Paris. After a red-eye flight, jet lag, and the stress of navigating Charles de Gaulle Airport, she found herself unable to remember her hotel's name or address. For nearly 2 hours, she sat in a cafe, fighting rising panic as she tried to gather her thoughts. She later described it as feeling like my brain had suddenly aged 20 years. The episode passed after she rested, but it shook her confidence for the remainder of the trip. This cognitive overload is rarely discussed in travel guides, yet it affects many senior travelers. To protect yourself, build in transition days at the beginning of your trip. Resist the urge to hit the ground running with activities immediately after arrival. Consider printing physical copies of important information like hotel addresses and phone numbers, rather than relying solely on digital devices that might run out of battery or become overwhelming to navigate when you're tired. For international travel, learning just a few key phrases in the local language can reduce cognitive strain significantly. And there's no shame in requesting special assistance at airports. Those golf cart rides through terminals aren't just for people with physical limitations but can be a godsend for preventing the mental fatigue that comes with navigating massive international airports. Finally, consider traveling with a companion for more complex itineraries, or look into senior-focused tour groups for certain destinations where navigation might be particularly challenging. I've found that even the most independent-minded seniors appreciate having someone else handle the logistics for at least portions of more complex trips. The fifth and final risk we need to discuss is perhaps the most insidious because it affects our dignity and financial security. Senior-targeted scams and theft while traveling. The sad reality is that criminals around the world often view elderly tourists as ideal targets. They assume we're wealthy, less tech-savvy, more trusting, and less likely to physically resist a robbery. During my visit to Barcelona's famous Las Ramblas district, I witnessed 2 separate incidents of seniors being targeted by pickpockets within just one afternoon. These weren't random crimes, The thieves were specifically watching for older tourists who appeared slightly disoriented or distracted by the sights. They operated with shocking efficiency, and most victims didn't even realize they'd been robbed until much later. Even more concerning are the sophisticated scams targeting seniors. In many tourist destinations, scammers have perfected their approach to seniors. From fake tour guides who promise to take you to hidden gems but actually lead you to overpriced shops where they earn commissions, to the notorious gold ring or spilled substance scams designed to distract you while an accomplice steals your belongings. My own sister fell victim to a taxi scam in Mexico, where the driver insisted her prepaid hotel reservation had been cancelled and offered to take her to a better hotel instead. Thankfully, she insisted on calling her original hotel directly and discovered the driver was lying. The reservation was perfectly intact. Had she gone along with the driver's suggestion, she would have ended up at an overpriced property where the driver received a hefty kickback. To protect yourself, research common scams in your destination before traveling. Keep your valuables in a money belt worn under your clothing rather than in external pockets or bags. Consider bringing a decoy wallet. With a small amount of cash and expired cards to hand over in the unlikely event of a robbery, this simple precaution has saved many travelers from losing everything. Be especially cautious with new friends who approach you with too much enthusiasm or unlikely stories. While meeting locals is one of the joys of travel, legitimate friendships rarely begin with strangers approaching you in tourist hotspots with overly familiar behavior. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. When using ATMs, choose machines inside banks rather than on the street, and always cover the keypad when entering your PIN. For added security, consider wearable emergency devices that work internationally. These allow you to call for help with the press of a button and can provide peace of mind, especially if you're traveling solo. Now, having covered these 5 critical risks, I want to emphasize something important. None of these should stop you from traveling. Travel in our golden years is not just a luxury. It's a vital way to maintain cognitive health, emotional well-being, and zest for life. Studies consistently show that seniors who continue to explore new places experience slower cognitive decline and report higher life satisfaction. The key is not to avoid travel but to travel smarter. With the right preparation, you can minimize these risks and focus on enjoying the incredible experiences that await you. Remember, you've spent decades working hard and raising families. You deserve to explore this beautiful world safely and confidently. As a personal example, after learning about these risks the hard way, I've actually increased my travel rather than cutting back. This past year alone, I visited 3 countries and taken numerous domestic trips to see my grandchildren. The difference is that now I travel with awareness and preparation rather than blind optimism. One final tip I'd like to share from my own experience. Consider working with a travel agent who specializes in senior travel. Yes, I know many of us pride ourselves on our independence and ability to book online, but a good agent who understands the unique needs of travelers over 70 can be worth their weight in gold. They can recommend senior-friendly accommodations, arrange appropriate travel insurance, and create itineraries that balance adventure with necessary downtime. Before I sign off, I'd love to hear about your own travel experiences and any additional tips you might have for fellow senior travelers. Please share your stories in the comments below. Your wisdom could help another viewer avoid a difficult situation on their next adventure. If you found this information helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more content designed specifically for living your best life after 60. And if you know someone who's planning a trip soon, please share this video with them. It might just save their vacation. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. Remember, age is just a number, but wisdom comes from being prepared. Safe and happy travels to you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Here's to many more adventures in the years ahead.